Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Welcome back to the Harmonious Workplaces Podcast, and we are in episode 5, Practical Tips to Implement Change Part 2. And I'm here. My name is Rich Cruz, and I am a certified management consultant and SHRM CP and a whole bunch of other things that we don't have to get into. And joining me today again is my partner in crime, Ben Kleinman. Hey, Ben.
How you doing, Rich? Good to see you again.
Great to see you too, man.
Good to see you again. And we are remiss that we don't have Cheryl Volpe here with us today. She's feeling a little under the weather, so speedy recovery to her.
Yes,
look forward to having her
absolutely.
back next time.
Yep, get better soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Miss you already.
Rich, I'm sorry?
I said we miss her already.
Oh, yeah. No,
we
the
just started.
episode has already gone downhill, so it's just a matter of time, right?
Right.
Last time, Rich, we talked with Cheryl about a lot of practical tips to make change stick and to get change to be effective. And so what we found is that we had so many good ideas and so much good conversation that it really just locked into that initial step of the early stages, the first steps, the first part of the process of change. So when you have someone thinking about change or recognizing that a change is needed, or the C-suite or some kind of small group of people starting to just conceive of what that change looks like,
Right.
That's where we spend most of our time. And so to kind of recap that, bring everybody up to speed, what we were talking about, we were really, really just super jazzed to talk about the importance of clear communication, and especially in that C-suite or executive level, or the small group that might be talking about change, just so that everyone there has really, really clarified the why. And I know we keep coming back to this, but it seems like something that is so critical, and just, I feel like when it's there, it makes life so much easier. And when it's not, it just sends things off the rails from the start. And so
Absolutely.
we talked a lot about that, and just clarifying the why up front, making sure that everyone, even your C-suites, your sponsors, are really aligned from the get-go. From there, we talked about being intentional with your communications and being open and honest about what you know about the contours or the framework, but that you don't necessarily know everything about where that change is going. And what that does is two things. One, it signals to your people that there's some psychological safety, that you don't necessarily know everything that's going to happen, that they are being invited in to be part of that journey.
Right.
So it gives them that safety, but also the opportunity to be part of that creation, to co-create that future with you. And so it helps them be part of that journey, as opposed to having change done to them. They get to be part of that creation process. And so that was really important as well. And then last thing, we touched on how stories can be a really effective tool to help that change resonate. And you mentioned it on an emotional level as well as in an intellectual level. And so it really helps people grasp those things. Was there anything that, before we dig into the rest of the project or the rest of your change initiative, which we'll hit on today pretty hard, was there anything that you feel like we missed in that summary?
No, you did a great job on the summary, man.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah,
Cool.
I think one thing I would add, I recently I wrote an article last week on using storytelling in OD, right, and organizational development, and OCM too, organizational change management for those who don't know. Yeah, my friend Lisa Apolinski, she's a certified management consultant. I know her from IMC USA. She wrote a book. I'm not sure if I mentioned that last week, but I certainly mentioned my article. But she talks it in her storytelling about how we make the audience feel like they're like the hero part of the story, right?
Yeah.
Where we assume as the change leader or change manager or consultant or whatever role you're playing in this, we are more of like that mage or that we're the more or less the Obi-Wan to the Luke or the uh I don't know
Shepherd.
the shepherd. Yeah,
Okay. The
so
guide,
yeah,
maybe.
we're the guide, right? We're really um helping them to become that hero, to take on the
Okay.
quest, to overcome the foe, whatever that is. She in the context of what she does, she puts it into these different Hollywood tropes, which is it's kind of fun. But even
Hmm.
um, but I just thought I'd mention that because it does make sense. We talked about like some of that, letting them be part of the process and share,
Yeah.
then the shared goal setting
Hmm.
for them to be motivated. Um, but if they can insert themselves in the story as playing that part of, the
The
the band
hero.
of hobbits or whatever it is that they're doing, to reach that goal. So I just thought I'd mention that because it's been top of mind for the last couple of days.
Yeah. Oh, I like it. That's great.
Yeah,
That's great. That helps really concretize the idea of using stories. And
sure.
I think as we go through today and our conversation today about other stages of that change process, I think we'll find that stories continue to be a really effective tool, a
Yeah,
really effective mechanism. So let's dig in.
sure, sure. So, yeah, like you said, like last time we only got to like 42.1% of our best transformation tips. And those
Right.
who know, if
Those who
if you've
know,
been
no, there you go.
tuning in, you know what that 42.1 means. But um yeah, so we last time was like we've been talking about, like if we look at the five process groups of project management, right? We have gone through implementation, maybe some planning, but really we need to now get into the execution and the monitoring controlling parts of a change project, right? Um,
Right, right, right.
yeah, so we still need, I think one thing that I wanted to bring up was Alan Landers and his recent article that he wrote because of me. And one of the things he
You're
says is
everywhere
like,
on the literature scene, man. That's fantastic.
well, I mean, look, he asked, like, I need some inspiration. I said, hey, can you give me some, literally some practical diagnostic or intervention OD strategies,
Hmm.
right? So communication was a big part of it, and we could talk a little bit more about that, of course, through these
Yeah.
execution stages. But the measuring of some of the results too, those the like what are those KPIs beforehand and after?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that, Ben, but I found that when somebody engages me as a consultant, whether internal or external, right? They want to know the results, so I think a practical tip I can offer is baseline your results before everything starts and have those set KPIs during that
Hmm.
initial communication phase, because by the end of this you want to be able to have some kind of both
Yeah.
quantifiable and qualifiable.
Fully agree. And it's funny. It's almost something that it seems like goes without saying, but I suppose it does have to get said, is that you do need to have some kind of way of tracking your progress or some kind of way of measuring your progress so that you know that you've gotten to the there, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
You have to have some way of whether it's we've spent X amount of money and we've realized X amount of benefit, or we've spent X amount of time on this journey and here's where we've come and here's the value of that time spent. There's
Right.
there's got to be some way. And on a lot of projects, it's going to have very different metrics that mean something to the people involved or to the stakeholders involved. A lot of the folks, if it's a public company, a lot of folks won't really care about how you get there. They just want to see the return on their investment,
Right.
as a shareholder. Internally, people might have very different needs as far as, did we open up more jobs, or did we upskill more people, or did we make a system that is saving people X amount of time, or providing Y amount more data visible throughout the organization. I mean, it's those kinds of things. So each change project, just like every project will have its own set of metrics that resonate. But absolutely right,
Yep.
you do have to have those.
Sure.
And
Sure.
you may find that your initial ideas about metrics that matter may be pretty close, but you may have to adjust those as you go. So, as your project evolves and as you find that you're going down that road and people are helping you shape that vision and execute that, you may find that new metrics become a little more important and
Yep.
some of the earlier metrics may be a little less important.
Sure. Sure. And I think that relying on some of those incumbent players, some of the subject matter experts, but people who are actually in the day to day, and they're going through this process. And like I said, we mentioned earlier, involving them in the goal setting and all that earlier. Um, getting them tied to some of those metrics as well, metrics or dimensions, depending on what
Yeah.
you're actually measuring there.
Yeah.
Getting
Yeah.
them tied to that as part of those SMART goals, right? Like,
Right. Right.
in X amount of time, we're going to achieve X amount of, calls or widgets done, or, so whatever that metric is going to be, they need to understand that their performance is going to be tied to that. But, you know, um, we also need to kind of dispel some of the fears of, we talked about psychological safety, that if you don't meet this, you're out.
Right.
That just derails everything. Yeah.
Well, you have to understand the context too, and why someone might or might not have achieved those is important for
Right.
what they're facing. But it's interesting too that a lot of times people hear metrics and they think about money spent or jobs slashed or jobs created, or how many months it took to roll out a new computer system, or a new IT system or something
Sure.
like that. How many dollars spent on consultants to transfer from system A to system B, or to set up a new organization, whatever it might be. But I think something that we might want people to consider is the idea of, since we're talking about change, we're talking about behavior, we're talking about psychological safety, the idea of somehow recognizing new behaviors that you want people to embody, to embrace, to show throughout their progression through this change. And so it may be just, how do you enable that new way of thinking, new way of working? And it may be that your metric or some sort of call out that you have is this idea of, we started the journey and 42.1% of our employees showcased this positive behavior that we wanted to amplify. And so by the end of the journey, that metric might be something like 90% of our employees will show XYZ trait, or
Right.
will do something along that behavioral contour. And
Sure.
so that's another way it's not necessarily as numeric or quantifiable as dollars spent or bodies hired, but it's maybe almost important in a cultural way.
Okay. Sure. Sure. Have you ever done anything in the way of like a pre-assessment, post-assessment type of situation where, like, for instance, I've done this before, where I've done like a employee engagement survey, or job satisfaction type of survey prior to the event, right? And then after treatment, after the intervention, the change, checked in with them afterwards. You ever done anything like that?
Yeah, it's been, I found it to be effective to have check-ins or some kind of, whether it's a survey or one-on-ones or small group meetings or even just attending a team meeting. So a lot of times you'll have a team or multiple teams who are out doing certain things as part of this change journey and helping to craft new policies, new procedures, build out a new system, set up a new organization, whatever it might be. You'll have these teams working. And so regular check-ins with those folks or regular check-ins with people on that team that are carrying a lot of the messaging out through their parts of the organization. And so I might not be able to meet with everyone in finance, but through a smaller group of people, I can have touch points with them and they can infuse the change throughout finance and bring back questions, bring back concerns, bring back what's working, what's not working, bring back messaging that resonates, bring back something like finance has decided to have a international summit, all hands call in 2 months. Hey, that's a good opportunity for someone leading this change from finance to get in front of that group and talk about the benefits of the change, talk about where we are, talk about why we did it if it's early on in the process, and help really get the word out there and bring that on. So I found that just regardless of what tool you use, like you say, whether it's a survey or a check-in or some kind of measurement or one-on-ones, just having that as a regular cadence where you're not just pushing information out, but also you're getting some kind of qualitative and quantitative back that you can use to track your own, like we were just talking about, tracking your own metrics.
Right.
But also just to keep your pulse, to keep your finger on the pulse, I guess I want to say, of how the change is going and where it is. Because it's so important to have a sense of, do you need to adjust? Do you need to go faster because people are moving along and they've already got it? Do you need to slow down a little bit? Do you need to amplify a certain pitch? Do you need to come at a question or to come at some pockets of resistance with more data, or do you need to come at it with more emotionality? Do you need to come at it with a different approach? It's all of that. Sure.
I'm reminded, so just to kind of validate, like the real world stuff you're talking about that you deployed to some of the literature out there, right? When I was going through my OD Change Leadership certification course last year, we went through a Harvard Business Publishing simulation of a change process. Oh, wow. It was pretty cool. And what you had to do is, they gave you kind of a case study, right? And you had these different levers that you could pull at different times, and you had certain. You could only pull these levers only like a certain amount of times over certain weeks, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so it was a fun game, right?
I'm picturing you behind the curtain like the Wizard of Oz.
Right. Well, I felt like the Wizard of Oz. Like I felt like I'm manipulating all these people,
That's right. That's right.
But the reality,
for everyone out there, that is not the model of change that we're advocating.
No, do not be the omnipotent.
Do not be the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain.
Right. The all great and powerful. That is the antithesis of good change leadership, just so you know. Anyway, but I like what you said about so these different check-ins, but leveraging people from other departments and having them share stories and influence other people, because that's social that's the social influence is just huge, right? When you can get somebody to do that. I remember there were a few times in this simulation where we were trying a full a full organization meeting, right? Or just getting an edict from the CEO, and these things were not always very effective. And in real life, right, when you get to have a CEO that's just telling it, barking orders at everybody or whatever, it may not work. But
keep going. I gotta check my power.
Oh yeah.
You're probably laughing at me, but we're in that day and age.
Yep. Make sure you plug in. But what during this exercise, it was interesting that when we were able to find when there was a friend in another department, and you identify that these two actually like had some deeper relationship other than just being a coworker. It was something that you could leverage because you had a change champion, essentially, right? That could influence the resistor. And it took us like 3 or 4 tries to like, I don't really know if that's going to work. That feels like
Really?
it's small,
Okay, so it was a
but
little back and forthy.
yeah. But the nice part, like, and I've seen this, if you can get that one resistor that would normally be on the tail end of the
Hmm.
adoption curve,
Right,
right?
right.
The laggards, right, all the way at the end there. If you can get one of those to come in as even a late adopter, you can sweep up a bunch of other late adopters. Um,
Hmm.
you know, if they can help tell a good story too. You know,
Well, and that gives you also an opportunity as the as the puppet master to have a nice storyline as well, because you can then take those learnings and soften them a little bit, but help make it part of that change story. And so, one of the tactics that I like to use, or one of the tips that I might recommend, is that as you're going through this change journey, you have people executing day in and day out. You have people who are implementing new X, Y, or Z, or recrafting D, E, or F, that kind of thing. You have this need for amplifying positivity or amplifying wins. A lot of times I hear people about, let's just go after early wins, and that'll help. That'll really energize everybody. And in some cases that's true. In some cases that doesn't work quite as well.
sure,
But I think one of the things that you're touching on is that if you have this story that's rooted in a kernel of let's say challenge. You were talking before about stories and having a hero. Almost every good story has some kind of challenge that hero has to
that's right.
overcome. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you have a kind of vanilla challenge, it's going to make for a less compelling story. But if you have a really good challenge, and it doesn't have to get, here's where the opportunity is to depersonalize a little bit. So it's not just like Ben was being a change negator because he didn't like Rich, who was leading the change, and he felt it was a personal affront that Rich needed him to do something different. You can soften that a bit or change the frame of that a bit, but you can say, well, this person had a really good reason not to change. It was threatening his livelihood, or it was threatening
Sure.
his ability to feel like he was succeeding in his job. And he had all these relationships with customers he'd built, and he felt like that was going to go out the window, and he'd lose his sense of worth with his customers, and his customers would see him less, or he wouldn't have as much interaction with them, and he'd really miss that part of the job, whatever it is. And so you can take that and you can say, well, as part of this, what we were able to do is we were able to say, no, actually, we're going to give Ben more time with his customers in a different way so that he could add more value and have a deeper relationship with those customers and do less stuff that was not adding value to those customers. So you
To
take
the
that
customers.
story
Yeah.
and you amplify that out. And that does a couple of things that you were saying. I think first off, it says that people can change and we can help them change. So other people out there who may not be interested in change, take note that this can happen. And it helps give people something like, oh, I was thinking about that too. Yeah, I was scared about that, but it looks like it worked out okay. So I'm going to jump on board now.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it gives
sure.
leaders a chance to see that their change can be successful, and that if you modify the wording or the way that you have these touches, that it can bring your organization along in a much better way than just do it because I said to do it.
Right. 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 Right.
We talked a lot about the drawbacks of having that heavy-handed approach in prior episodes. So
Yep.
so that's really nice.
So we've talked about last time we talked about the beginning phases here. What else in this? What else in this implementation before we get to trying to refreeze, right? The change in, right, from the
Right,
wins
right,
model,
right,
right?
right.
What what else can we add to to this middle section here?
No, this is good. This is really good. So we've got the continued use of stories, super important. We've got the idea that your messaging might have to change or morph a little bit depending upon who you're talking to. So your why is still going to be super crisp and super consistent, but how you frame that why for different people might have to adjust. But you can use stories to do that. You can use these checkpoints, whether they're surveys or small group meetings, one-on-ones, roadshows, any of that kind of stuff. But these idea of regular checkpoints to make sure that you're tracking against what you said is these metrics or some kind of mixture of qualitative, quantitative measurements of how you're doing against where you're trying to get to. Right. So those are some things that we talked about today to kind of help you carry through that change.
Yep.
Go ahead. Oh, I think one of the things that's jumped out as we've had this conversation is just the need for consistency there. So you're consistently telling stories, celebrating when people do things well in the moment. So rather than wait till a big year-end pizza party, you have these small moments of recognition throughout. That's as important as those small moments of water cooler talk that you're saying, oh, hey, what do your friends in finance think about this change? They think it's going well. Half of them, 42.1% think it's complete garbage, but the other percent think it's reasonable.
Yeah.
Those are super important, but just on a cadence, regular cadence.
Yep.
Sorry, I cut you off. Please.
No, that's great. And actually, I think going along with that, the cadence is also some other just practical thing that we could probably do a whole other episode on, or series, even for that matter, is leveraging some of the different types of communication channels that we have, and the methods that we have, right? What tools and techniques we have on different channels, because we're in a unique time in our history, right, where people are everywhere. So we have to figure out, do we bring people into one place physically to be together? And if so, what's the size of a group that makes sense that for effectiveness, right? And then
multimodality.
Yeah.
Super important,
right? But then we have all the digital communication channels that we have available. Zoom's like we're using right now, or Teams, or any of that stuff. And then leveraging like project management software, Asana or Basecamp or something like that, right? And then another thing that comes to mind is the good old email that used judiciously, but and so I think that might be something for us to talk about later on. But I thought it'd be worth mentioning here as a tip, because practically you do need to plan your, go back to the planning stage of project management. There is a knowledge area of communication, and we need to plan that communication throughout. Like you said, when are we going to reach out to people? And that could be planned and ad hoc as we need it. But when we do that, what are those, what kind of tools do we need to procure? And when are we going to deploy any of those, if that makes sense?
Right. No, absolutely. The idea of part of your planning, and I am for sure not as steeped in Project Management Institute methodology as you are, but I believe that communications is a pretty significant part of the PMI methodology, and having some kind of, a lot of times I hear it called a communications cascade or a communications plan, that kind of thing, where you're mapping out your communication strategy in the same way that you would the rest of your change strategy, in the same way that you would in terms of your whole business strategy. It's just another angle or another swim lane in that whole process. But for sure that's important. One of the things actually that I did want to make sure that we touched on in terms of a practical tip for change is thinking and then executing on training, whether it's formal training, informal training, but giving people those educational opportunities, learning and development, whatever you call it at your company, the idea that you have to have formal and informal ways that work within your culture to give people the knowledge that they need to do whatever you're asking them to do. And so in some cases, it might be a very small lift, like you're going from computer system A to computer system B, and all it is a different login. Great. All you need to do is make sure that it's super clear what the new login process is, where to get your new password, how they get help, and they're good.
Right.
In other cases, it's like a whole new way of doing a certain task or achieving a certain outcome. That's going to take a lot more. And coming back to your different ways of different people need different ways of hearing different things, probably multiple times. You're going to have those educational materials, those training materials, those learning opportunities, synchronous, asynchronous, video, stories, reading, podcasty type stuff, memos.
Speaking my language, man. That's great.
All of that, whatever it is, websites, all of that kind of stuff, in-person stuff. You're going to need some people who just get it. They just need a quick, very, very small blurb, and they're self-service. They're good to go. Other people, they're going to need a lot more hand-holding, maybe some one-on-one time. So it's that whole spectrum, but you do need to be pretty intentional about that as well.
Sure. Yep. And the research definitely supports that those when you could have a culture that's a learning culture, you're going to have people that their self-efficacy, their self-confidence goes up. They're more apt to be engaged with not just the project, but they have their organizational commitment to the organization itself, to the company that they're working for, goes up as well.
Sure.
And they say leaders are the best learners, right? So if you want to really foster the next generation of leadership, make sure they're always learning something new from you.
So, I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
Makes sense.
I like that.
Cool.
Maybe we'll put another pin in a future episode, but I like something that you were just talking about, because it makes me think about stuff that Cheryl has talked about in terms of this idea of some of the change theories seem like they come from the world of family dynamics and family therapy. And so, Cheryl can talk more about some of those methodologies. SAPER was one that sort of jumped to mind as far as being something that resonated with families, but also could resonate in the business context as well. And it's stuff that we've talked about in terms of people go on this change journey. They have to cross this chasm of change, all of that. Oh, yeah. Every theory has its own flavor and spin that they put on that journey, how they frame it. But it seems like that might be something, because as people feel more heard in a family, they're better family members. And as people feel more heard in an organization, they're going to feel like a company organization. They're going to feel more engaged, and they're going to participate more, which is basically what you were just saying.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, I think we're just about at time, Ben. Cool. So want to do a quick wrap up of this. And we did not get to some of the later part of the tips we can share, which
tips part 3 coming to part 3 might come to you.
Right. How do you actually make this thing stick at the end? Right. I think that's
how do you stick the landing? Right.
Yeah. Empowering the client and keeping that going, whether you're there or not. So let's consider that for if it's not next time, the time after that, or some other time. But, so a couple of takeaways from today that you.
Yeah. So for me, I think takeaways following on from our prior conversation, the use of stories, super important. Keep those going. Keep evolving your stories. Make them resonate emotionally and intellectually. That's super important. This idea of having some kind of a hero and a challenge that they've overcome can be a really good way to craft a story that can help quite a bit. Using stories to call out positive changes or people's positive behaviors that you want to showcase can be a really very effective way of making a change stick as you go through that. And you're going to pick those up as you go through the change. So
Sure.
you know you're going to need them, but you don't have to build them all before you initiate your change. You just plan that you're going to have these come out. The idea of intentionality around a cadence for check-ins,
Right.
for messaging, for communication, the idea of multimodality in terms of how you message things, how you receive messaging, and then also learning, education, training, those kinds of things, having that on some sort of regular cadence, but also in various digestible formats. Those were some of the things that jumped out at me today, and those will all help you get to where you're going, which is what you started us off about in terms of metrics and how you're gonna decide what you're tracking, how you're doing getting there, whether you've got there. If you need to adjust those along the way, do it intentionally, and that's okay. You can do that,
Sure.
but just make sure that you have some way to know that you're going where you're going.
Right. Baseline first and measure along the way. What doesn't get measured doesn't get done. Right. So
regular cadence. Yeah. What did I miss?
I think the only thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I don't remember if I heard you say this, but you mentioned earlier being not only accepting the fact that you may have to change your messaging, but be prepared to communicate that messaging, appropriately as well. So, things
good one.
Things are going to change, during change.
Your change will change.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, very good. Well, thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
This is great.
I like it. Good one.
So we will reconvene again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
That's right.
I hope
and
that
hopefully with our esteemed colleague Cheryl leading the charge.
I hope so. I hope saying the bat thing doesn't give me a copyright issue.
No, you'll be fine.
Right.
You'll be fine. 42.1% of our listeners don't even know what the heck
don't even know what that is.
Good.
That's right. Yep. Right on. All right. So then I'll bat dance us out of here, and we will see you all in the next episode.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
All right. Take care. See y'all later.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.